Officially live. Welcome to the next edition of Go Learn. Today, we are talking about two simple tools for living your business's core values with Tamara Kemper. Super excited to have Tamara on board. She is a teacher, instructional designer, and operations consultant. Every day, she and her team help fast-growing, mission-driven business owners create and document the systems that will allow them to scale and help them stay a wonderful place to work. I bet that's something that's been on everybody's to-do list for a long time and not been checked off. So pay some close attention to Tamara. I'm going to hand it over to her, but she's someone you need in your future. Tamara, over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, ironic that we put off checking this thing off, and we are going to talk about checking things off. So it's going to be very meta today, and I'm so glad to be here. So I wanted to just start off with a little story that really exemplifies what we're doing here. The last time I went to one of those car washes, you know, the carousel ones where you can do all the things, and I needed to go. I was thinking I was super smart because I had my kids in my car. They were like probably 4 and 6 or somewhere around there. And I had my kids in my car. I was going to get a car wash. I was going to get my oil changed. I was going to get fueled up all in one, saving time, entertaining the kids. It was like a genius move. When I pulled up, the first guy came. He was the car wash guy, and I got to spend a few minutes with him, you know, having that ceremony where you tell them, no, I don't want the premium one, and, you know, that whole thing. And then I thought maybe I was done, but then the oil change guy came and we got to have a second ceremony about not wanting the fancy blend. And then I didn't know this, but there was actually a gas pumping guy because the other two guys apparently weren't certified to pump gas. So then I got to talk to the gas guy. And then I got some bonus conversations where the first one, a windshield guy came and talked to me about the windshield that I didn't come there to repair at all. And then I got to talk to the dent guy about the dent that I was not there to fix. And all in all, this whole thing where I thought I was being really efficient, now I had spent 10 minutes having conversations I didn't want to have with people I really didn't want to chat with at that particular moment because I was trying to do something else. My favorite, however, was the guy at the end with the wax crayon, which they never wiped off, by the way. They were making like a little picture for my kids in the back. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Like they're trying to like entertain my kids. What I didn't know until later was they were doing that. That was what they drew on my kids' window, my 3 and my 6-year-old's window. And so, you know, dead face for my kids was not exactly what I was wanting. But the situation is that experience, I believe, and I think I might talk you into this, that experience was something where if they would have had clear core values, if they would have had a process, a system for how someone goes through that experience that's grounded in the core values, that would have been a very, very different experience. But instead, I will never forget the dead face guy. And so everyone here, you all have experiences. You all have ways that you touch your clients and your customers. You all have moments, whether it's with you or whether it's with your team, where people are interacting with you and your team. So we're going to really talk about how we can ground all of those experiences in your core values and make sure that nobody ever tells a story like that on some LinkedIn Live down the road. So without further ado, let's jump in.
Tamara, I'm going to pause you for a second. You're in presenter view for us. So we're seeing your slides, but a little bit small.
I'm so sorry.
You can't tell from your end because you're presenting.
Because I did the wrong screen.
I know. They give you two.
How's that? Places. Thanks.
That's the one.
That's the one. Thank you. All right. So let's move past that guy. So why core values? So core values are a set of shared beliefs, a set of beliefs that everybody on your team has to share. So in the absence of defining core values for your business, what you have instead are all of the humans that come to work for you, they're going to bring their own core values. And that's great because we want people who are individuals and who have, you know, their own ways of thinking. We want diversity. We want all that good stuff. But overarching that, you need to make sure that everyone on your team shares a small subset of values. So it's that Venn diagram where you want to have some overlap in the center. In the absence of that, everyone's just going to do their own thing. And so that's where you have the guy who drew the smiley face, because for him, that was super funny and that was super charming maybe. And so you're leaving those things to chance. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about this. Now, we are not going to spend a ton of time today talking about how to determine your core values. That's a whole other thing. However, I do want to just touch on this in case you're coming into this conversation not having had to define these already. I love to just think about what makes you weird. You know, everybody says, you know, they want integrity to be one of their core values. Well, integrity is great. And in general, I don't want anyone I work with to, you know, be stealing or being dishonest. But that's not very unique, and it's not really going to stand out for anybody. Instead, think about the things that make you different, that make you unique. The word weird really resonates well for me as well. What do you want to be known for? So think about when you're leaving that mark on the world, and when people think of your business, what comes to mind for them? What's going to be really memorable? Speaking of memorable, we want to phrase them in a way that's super memorable. I sat next to somebody at a conference not too long ago, and we were talking about core values, and she had one that was related to like going all the way and really finishing things. And I was trying to help her come up with something that her team would really be able to latch onto and never forget. She's like, well, I don't know. I just don't want people to go half-ass about things. And I said, okay, well, what's the opposite of that? And she stops for a minute and she thinks, she goes, whole ass. And so that was what she made one of her core values. And she's like, oh my God, and they were a gym. So she was like, oh, we're gonna put that on all our shirts, go whole ass. And nobody's ever gonna forget that. So yes, it's great to say, you know, finish what you started or be integrity. But when you put something like go whole ass or whatever, that sounds a little weird. But anyway, you want to put those things in a way that's going to be really resonant for your team so that they're going to be able to come back to that and remember them again and again. All kinds of good things can be found in this book, The Core Value Equation. I'm going to murder his name, Darius Mirshadzadeh. If you have a team, this is a great book for not only defining your core values, but then also some of the things we're going to talk about today, operationalizing them. And so this will give you some activities and things, but we're going to use a little worksheet. I did provide a worksheet to Heather to give to all of you that has a list of all the different themes or core values that you might have. And so if you don't have core values, I would recommend before we continue on, just take a glance at this sheet or just kind of jot down on a paper what maybe one or two themes might be that you really find as important and that you want to make sure every single person in your business shares them. One of our core values is love humans, for example. And so it's very important that every single person on our team actually loves humans, because you know what? Not everybody does. Some people, that's not their jam. And so it's a really important thing that everybody shares that. So even if you can just think of one for this activity or for this little talk that I'm doing, that would be great. So with that said, I'm gonna tell Heather to share the link to this worksheet. I beg, I implore you, please just go with me. Don't scroll ahead because you'll kind of get all turned around. So go ahead and just take a moment to jot down on a piece of paper, or if you want to use the link that Heather put in the chat just now, you can click on that and just jot down at least one or two of your core values. Again, those are the shared beliefs that everyone on your team has to share. You get lots of things that are unique about everyone, but there's those core ones that everyone's going to be the same. All right. So core values. I told you about one very special experience that I had where I got to see maybe a lack of core values in a business. But if you have core values, those are showing up, or those ideally should show up in a lot of different places. So as you think about your clients or your customers, where do those clients and customers experience your core values? Think about it for a minute. And if you want to drop a couple things in the chat, that'd be great. Otherwise, just kind of think to yourself, what are those core values? So you might see them in customer service when people are calling in. Maybe the way you invoice or collect your payments. Are you really efficient and really tight, or is it kind of all over the place with back and forths? That could be a very clear way of core values. Is it your forms and your documents, the way they look, the way you write, the words that are on those things? Is it how you're showing up in your social media, the tone in your social media, the design in your social media, the frequency in your social media, the voice? Maybe it's how you're doing your emails. Your clients are experiencing, anytime you talk to them, what kind of messages are they seeing value in what you're providing them? The written content that you have, any resources that you provide, any tools that you provide. How you do your appointment setting. I remember when Calendly kind of took off, there was this period of time where it was like nobody quite knew how to ask someone to use their Calendly, because it almost felt like aggressive in certain ways, the way you said it, like, oh, well, sign up on my Calendly. No, you have to be thoughtful about how you want your clients to experience that. The quality of your product or service, oh my gosh, the actual thing you do, they are picking up on these core values. Customer onboarding, how you bring them into your service or your product, and then how you conduct phone calls, when you conduct phone calls. One of the best advice I ever got from somebody was, whenever there's a question of how something will be received, pick up the phone. So things like that are ways that you can display your core values in everything you do. And then, of course, for those of you that have teams, your team members are experiencing your core values. And guess what? If your core values that you're trying to share with your clients and your customers don't match what the team is experiencing internally, it's not going to work. So whatever you say those core values are, you need to be checking for those in all elements of your experience, both internal and external. So that might happen in employee onboarding. That might happen in evaluations. The way that you evaluate, or the way that you coach and provide feedback to your team, is for sure a way that you can demonstrate your core values. Recruitment, meetings. So about a million other things, but there are so many different ways that this shows up. And if you're not intentional about the ways that you're doing this, you are going to miss opportunities to strengthen your team and strengthen your connection with your audience, with your clients. So on that worksheet, there is another area where we can just take a minute, and I'm not going to give a full amount of time, but ideally you want to identify 10 experiences. So remember, these were a whole bunch of them, but you probably have other ones that you care about. 10 experiences that if you did nothing else, these 10 experiences have to be tightly aligned to your core values. They might be internal ones that you want your team members to experience. They might be external ones that you want your clients to experience. But can you come up with 10 experiences that have to align to your core values? And maybe, Heather, can you think of any off the top of your head for your business?
Absolutely. So one of the things that that is overdue for updating is kind of my user interface. And so getting into a Go Done session needs help, needs work. I feel like that's a big spot. And then here's where you got me thinking about my team. is getting all the hosts. I kind of let them run their own show, which they're all phenomenal. But I don't feel that I have a good sense of our core values. For a lot of them, I could probably name you or be in the ballpark for some of their core values and all of that. But for us to come together and have some shared values that we want to express to the people who attend the Go-Go Done sessions, I think is a real missed opportunity. And within a single Go-Go Done session, you have the intro, you have the breaks, and then you have the exit. So right off the bat, those are a bunch of places where I think we could really tighten up and really do a better job of expressing our values. I need to help, collectively identify with the team
what those are,
and then look at how we can express those values. So my team of hosts will be seeing this worksheet. I can tell you that right now.
Hooray. Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because of course, as founders, we come in with our own values, right? We can't help it. We just have them. And I know, Heather, for you've clearly identified what yours are. And so it's easy to just say, well, that's it. That's the business values as well. And more than likely they are, but then there might be another element that you need to add in that's more indicative of the business itself or of the culture that you really want to foster. So I love that. I love that you're going to take that to the team and define those together. Okay, so we've got a couple high priority experiences. What this becomes is this is your project list. This is your finite list that you're going to say, we're going to glow up these 10 experiences so that they are tightly aligned to our core values. And then once you finish those 10, you can always add more and you can always be continuously improving. But I found whenever you give yourself a finite list, it feels so good to check those things off and just feel like, yep, I did it. I've got a better experience than I did either for internal and external. So this is your list. So now that we have our list and we need to start working on blowing up these experiences, we need some tools. We need to figure out how to do that. And there are 3 different ways. We're only going to talk about 2 today, but there are 3 different ways that I love to document how you are living your core values in your business. Those are standards, checklists, and procedures. So we will start first with standards. Now, if you kind of put these on a hierarchy, and maybe I should have made them in a hierarchy, standards are going to be your highest level, most least specific, more general. Checklists are kind of somewhere in between in terms of specificity, and procedures are where you really need to get to nitty gritty. So we'll talk through each of these. So let's start with standards. So there are so many ways that you can use standards, but the idea with standards is, they are rules, they are guidelines, they need to be memorized. And all they do is they provide boundaries for your teams to play within. So when you have a really creative, a really phenomenal team that you kind of just want to let them loose to do their things, amazing. You should absolutely do that. But it's also really important to define what the boundaries of that are. Because what can happen is you can have a really kind, really caring, really well-meaning employee that has a slightly different take on things, and you may end up with a little bit of a problem. What this is not is it's not step-by-step directions. In this case, we are empowering our team to own the outcome, and they are policies that must be followed. So these are like the non-negotiables. So a couple examples. This is our friend Simon Sinek. I wish he was my friend. Maybe he will be someday. One of their standards is make the decision you think is the right decision to make, which is kind of a bold idea. But it's saying to the employees, we don't want you coming and checking with the manager. We actually want you to make the right decision that you think is the right decision. So, he says here, it enables us to shift from a culture of permission to a culture of intent. But if you don't state that is a standard that your employees are expected to make decisions, you then are leaving that to chance. That's a big question mark. So it's thinking through ahead of time how you want your employees to behave. Another one I love is a Zappos. I don't know if these are still Zappos ones, but these are great examples. These are not procedures for holding calls for calls, but they have a couple rules. They don't hold their phone reps responsible for call time. That means it doesn't matter how long you're on the phone, Zappos employee, you can go as long as you want. We want you to solve the customer's problem. And the other standard is we don't upsell. So that with the car wash people, they would not have gotten along well at Zappos. So these are standards. These are not a procedure. These are not a checklist. These are just rules for how you want things to go. So based on your core values, now if you go to the next page on that worksheet, based on your core values, can you write 3 standards for one of your experiences that you identified? That would be the next step. So Heather, I'm gonna keep working through this with you. As you think about those 2 experiences that you were doing, is there one that kind of lends itself to standards, to having a standard?
I think that the easiest one for me to tackle right off the bat is probably the beginning of a go-go done session.
Okay.
And I think that like one standard would be like everyone gets welcomed individually. We're fairly small groups. It's not like you have 1,000 people join at once, right? We're like a handful of folks. And so I feel strongly about making sure people are welcomed individually and called by name.
Totally.
And maybe another one is learning to pronounce people's names appropriately would be like 2 like really big sticklers for me that I don't know that I have to say I'm a stickler about it. I feel like my hosts already are there, but that's something that that would go down for me as a standard. And I don't know if that's too prescriptive, if that's too.
No, those are great. Those are great. And so what core value does that align with for you personally? I know you haven't done your business ones, but for you personally.
Right. For me personally, that's a piece of my 2 core values are excellence and fun. And for me, that goes under the excellence umbrella.
Right.
Because I want it to be the best experience it could possibly be for someone. I don't want to make something, I'm on the whole ass camp. Like, I don't want to do it half-ass. I'm in that camp. I will sign up for one of those t-shirts. And so I want somebody to have a really wonderful experience and being seen and having your name known and pronounced correctly. I think are big pieces of that.
Yeah. And it's different, right? It sets you apart because most webinars you go on, most group meetings you go on, people aren't going to spend a ton of time on that. So you're saying this is how we're going to show up differently.
Right.
So that's great. Those are great standards. And this, as I said, this is an activity on that worksheet to just think through how you want to do your standards. So let's keep going. So now we're on checklists. So checklist is taking standards and it's getting a little bit more specific. So it's making more of a step-by-step on how to do things. Checklists are also tools to make sure that every employee does the most important parts of a process every time. So whereas the standards are just general rules that guide behavior, checklists are more step-by-step. So these are key components that must be done properly every time. There might be high risk dependencies down the line. So I know there's a lot of professions where checklists are literally life-saving, like for surgeons, for pilots, where if you do not follow all the things, you are literally risking lives. I'm not sure if there's a ton of people on this call that have that, but perhaps. And so checklists are great anytime there are just things that absolutely must happen. It would have been good for me to have a checklist to make sure I was sharing the right screen at the beginning of this webinar. So live and learn. They basically just keep things from getting messed up. A great book, if you ever really want to nerd out on checklists, is called The Checklist Manifesto. But I love this quote: under conditions of complexity, not only are checklists a help, they are required for success. There must always be room for judgment, but judgment aided and enhanced by procedure. So this is a really important point, is when we make checklists, when I make checklists for our clients, or when I help our clients do this, it is not about taking the humanity out of the work. It is about empowering the human to show up in the ways that are more human. So if you have to be holding all of the steps in your mind and trying to remember all the things, you are not going to be focused on the ways that you are human, connecting with others and engaging and making things interesting and helping people learn, you're going to be trying to think about what the next thing you need to do is. So the idea with checklists is to take away all of that mental load and make things easier. So there's a couple different ways that you can do checklists. One is a do confirm, which is you are just doing the steps and then you're using the checklist to make sure you did it. And then the other one is a redo, which is usually when you're learning a process where you're literally step by step going through and doing each step on the checklist. Either way, I don't recommend more than like 5 to 9 steps for a checklist because it starts getting kind of crazy. Keep it easy, keep it to a page, or if you use a system like we use Monday.com for most of our checklists, Asana, there's all kinds of great project management tools out there. But let's really think about what the most important things on the list are. So again, this is another page on your sheet. We won't really do a whole checklist right now, but maybe Heather, can you think of an experience that maybe you might want to create a checklist for to ensure your core values are showing up in your business that you haven't done already?
Yeah, I think if we stick with the intro example, if I were to take the kind of the intention of the time, I could see some of the pieces of that becoming a checklist, right? So the asking somebody their name or making sure everybody is addressed by name could actually be something on a checklist.
Could be.
And I think that putting the instructions in the chat is another, you know what I mean? Some of those procedural things could come through so that people feel welcome. They know what the expectations are, right? So having people feel comfortable, community is probably going to come up as one of our core values because we're a very strong community-minded group. So I think some of the procedural pieces there where that structure really enhances the values or really communicates the values could be added in there. And in fact, maybe a checklist for the entire session because there's not a ton to do in intros and breaks. But there's probably 1 to 2 things to do at each of those stages to be sure that they get checked off the list.
That's great. And then to kind of contrast that with like a standard, one of the standards we have on our team is one of our core values is mindful presence. And so we have a kind of a standard that like, if you literally can't be present with us, like either don't come, like let us know and don't come, or like make it clear what's going on or that you can't be so that we're all aware of why you're kind of off or whatever it might be. We're all human and we all have down days. Goodness knows last week, if I would have done this webinar, it would not have gone mindful or presenceful. But that would be an example of more of a standard of how things should go. And then the checklists are more of the things or the steps that need to happen. So the last one, as I said, is procedures. This is the work that we do in our business every day. So we actually help our clients write procedures for teaching employees how to do things. So checklists might be more for somebody who actually knows how to do the steps. They're just making sure they do them. Procedures are going to be more helpful when you're teaching someone step by step how to do those things, and you're giving context for why each of those steps is important. So that's another great tool that you can use, and we can certainly help with that at the Process Mavens if that's ever something you need help with. But the place that I want to end this presentation is you cannot do any of this to your team. Please do not. Heather, I love that your go-to instinct was I need to get with my team and we need to figure this out together. And that's exactly right. If you try to create standards, you try to create checklists, and you try to create procedures and you try to do that to your team, it is not going to go well. You must involve your team. You must bring them into the conversation so that everything you're building is really theirs and they feel that ownership, and it's a team collaborative. They're going to be starting to look for opportunities to embed those core values into everything you do. And so that's me. That's how you get a hold of me. As I said, we are the Process Mavens, and this is the nerdery we deal in every day, but we really care a whole lot about core values and making sure that those things are actually how you're doing all of the different tasks and responsibilities in your business.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tamara. And the best way I'm putting into the various chats, your LinkedIn, which is a good way to connect with you, and a link to your newsletter to subscribe. Tell us in the last maybe 30 seconds what we can expect from your newsletter.
Yeah, in the newsletter, it's a lot of tips and tricks for how to actually do these kinds of things, how to build processes, how to build checklist standards, things like that. But it's also a lot of just encouragement and perspective on leading a business with alignment to your core values in an environment where you're really clear with your team about what success looks like. So that's the kind of things that we care about.
Fabulous. I'm a fan and I subscribe myself. Woo-hoo. Thank you again so much for coming and for sharing your genius with all of us.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks again for the opportunity to chat with everyone.
You bet. You bet.